Good night and good evening. And thank you for joining us today as we talk the big C's, COVID, cancer, and caring for ourselves. And today our speaker will be our Dr. Angela Hill, who is professor and assistant dean of clinical affairs at Teenage College of Pharmacy, and also the We Care project director. And with that, I will let Dr. Hill take from there and do the introductions and everything else. And thank you.
Well, thank you, Ms. Jackson. It's certainly a pleasure to be here with you all. And I applaud all of you for just showing up, considering it's a long weekend. It's after work. And I don't know about you, but here in Riverview, at least, we're wet right now. We've had some very wet weather. So it just speaks testaments to your commitment. And I do understand we're having a few people having technical difficulties. So we'll do our best to kind of catch them up as they come on board. And but it is certainly a pleasure to be here, and we're going to try to enlighten everyone on the three C's, because we haven't been talking about anything really but COVID the last 2 years. And I do think COVID is really important, and we still definitely need to continue talking about it, but we also need to talk about some of these other C's, particularly cancer, as well as caring for ourselves. And so I would like for you to utilize the chat, and I'm going to ask Ms. Jackson and Dr. Austin, and I'll be introducing who Dr. Austin is, particularly in some of our other team members. But I would like for you all to help kind of monitor the chat, because I'm going to direct people to kind of put some information in there. But Miss Novella, I already know she's from Tallahassee. I would like for us to start off just letting me know kind of where everyone is from. And if you are affiliated with the Zetas, the name of your chapter probably would help. Dr. Austin and myself would like to bless you all with, well, Dr. Austin and soon to be Dr. Edouard would like to bless you all with a token based on engagement and participation this evening. And so the first task will be to put in the chat where you're from and what chapter you might be affiliated with, because this was designed tonight just for the Zetas, so that we could have a little conversation and discussion. So I thought I would start off kind of telling everyone a little bit about We Care. I'm going to talk about We Care all throughout the presentation and some of the work that we've done. But We Care is an acronym for Work Group Enhancing Community Advocacy and Research Engagement. And to my left, maybe your right, you see a gentleman with his arms folded, and that's our dean, Dr. Kevin Sneed. He's the founding dean of the Teenage College of Pharmacy. And like myself, he's a pharmacist, but he's very passionate about community outreach. And his background actually is in the realm of chronic diseases or metabolic disorders. So things like diabetes, hypertension, high hypertension, and the like. He's very, that's what he does every day. As a pharmacy practitioner, he actually still, unlike many deans, he actually still sees patients. And so in terms of him, being a role model as an administrator, he also role models as a clinician. And so for that, I'm very grateful for him. But as I mentioned, We Care is a brainchild of his, a spinoff and the only living residual of a P20 grant that was a collaborative with the Moffitt Cancer Center and our College of Public Health at the University of South Florida. And at that time, during that P20 grant, there was a Center for Health Equity that was established. But when the funding ran out, he repurposed it and homed it in the Teenage College of Pharmacy. And after a couple of iteration of names, came up with We Care. And so the beautiful lady below him is Dr. Deborah Austin, who's with us tonight, serving as our technology queen. And she represents excuse me, Reach Up, which is our primary community partner, and they actually specialize in fetal and maternal health as well as just family supports. And I want you to raise your hand, Dr. Austin, so everyone can appreciate you. And then we also have this evening with us Ms. Pascal Edouard, who actually is a graduate student who has been assisting us in actually helping train our researchers. And as I explain our mission and stuff, you can appreciate a little bit more about what we do. But her background deals quite a bit with health disparities as well. And so she has just been such an asset to us and is completing her doctoral training and work as we speak. And so in a few months or so, we should be referring to her as Dr. Edouard. So we're so happy to have her. On the far right, you'll see a gentleman, Mr. Hiram Green, and he actually, like Dr. Austin, they both serve as our community liaisons. He has served as our public relations contact for the college since our inception in 2011, but he's been with the University of South Florida, as well as in the Tampa Bay area for approaching almost 40 years. Very well connected and has allowed us, between him and Dr. Austin, they've allowed us to really be able to get connected with individuals all across the Tampa Bay area and beyond. And then we also have student ambassadors. So the gentleman with the red tie is actually our first pharmacy ambassador, but we have a whole host of students from public health as well as pharmacy who volunteer their time to help us either with dissemination and analysis of some of our research efforts and or participate in our public outreach efforts. So why we care? As the dean would say, primarily our goal is to close the gap of health equity, health disparities, and we try it by really working hard to build trust with the community by allowing them to be a part of our decision making, allowing us to interact with them so we can appreciate their perceptions, their concerns, particularly as it relates to research and research participation. We all know on this particular call that African Americans particularly have experienced a lot of unfair treatment as it relates to healthcare in general, but certainly when it's come to research, the Tuskegee study is something that immediately comes to most of our minds. Not only that, the Henrietta Lack story is another example where again, we were unfortunately disenfranchised and treated inappropriately. But science benefited, from it. And so some of our medical advances, particularly in the area of treating syphilis and or a lot of what we know even about cancer and its origins and pathogenesis came actually from some of those two experiences. But because of that, it's left a really deep scar psychologically and otherwise in our culture as it relates to a willingness to participate in research. And so we have been committed to trying to really educate individuals about the evolution of research processes since those times and the protections that are in place. But not only are we using our platform to educate the community, we do just as much to educate the research community about the importance of being sensitive to the experiences of minority groups and marginalized groups, because we want to make sure that they can have diverse participation so that we can really know truly if therapies and devices are going to be effective in everybody, not just your middle-aged Caucasian male. And so we do a lot of training, and that's where Dr. Austin's insight and expertise on implicit bias, and certainly soon to be Dr. Edouard's insight on health disparities really has been beneficial. So for the last 2 months, we have been focusing on offering sessions for our researchers to appreciate what cultural humility is, and again, implicit bias, and some of the things that they need to know in terms of understanding culturally tailored messaging and nuances as it relates to interacting with the community. And so these are some of the things that we do so that the community knows we cares, as well as our research community. So prior to the pandemic, the way we would interact with the community would be face-to-face interactions like most people. So we were having what we call CAM events or community advocacy events where we allowed researchers to come and share their goals and objectives of their research projects to community members, and it allowed the community to ask questions. Those interfaces, hopefully resulted in the researchers getting, some recruitment opportunities out of that. But first, before they got a chance to talk to the community, we had our research advisory board, which is actually composed of community members, to include but not be limited, also members of our We Care team, like Dr. Austin or Mr. Green, who also would then we would just talk to the researchers to make sure they had those culturally tailored approaches to help with the recruitment efforts, but more so also give them some training on ways to make sure they retain the people that they recruited. So this is where we have used ourselves as liaisons between the researchers and the community in hopes that they, in trusting us, would then feel a little bit more comfortable participating in the research trials. And so we had a wealth of different kinds of community interfaces. But then when COVID happened, we had to pivot and pivot quickly. And I remember the meeting that Dr. Austin, Mr. Green, and myself had when we decided that we would offer a 4-part series on COVID, because we were paying attention that everybody that was at risk for getting it looked like us. And these are the same people that, as treatments come down the line, are probably going to be skeptical because of all of the misinformation that was out there. So we immediately started offering virtual workshops on all manners, panel discussions, town halls, and that's kind of how we met Mrs. Jackson. She became a groupie early on and then started inviting others. And so we have just loved the fact that we've been able to grow into having a very healthy relationship with her, and certainly her community, her work environment. And so it's just really been great. And what we feel now that we're over 200 workshops and other different mechanisms to try to connect with the community, not just about COVID, but other areas of health disparities. We think that we have certainly benefited the community by expanding, engaging them, as well as empowering them with a lot of information. So oftentimes it might be, it could be any member of our team. Most times it's been Dr. Sneed, a lot of times it's been me, many times it's been Dr. Austin, and then again, we've used our ambassadors in many ways to certainly help us with our messaging. But we can't do this alone. So as I mentioned, Reach Up is our primary community partner, but we work with other groups. The AHEC Centers, Moffitt is another continuous partner we have. Then we have national partners like 50 Hoops. But because of the pandemic and having that virtual platform, we've been able to connect to the national levels of civic and social, as well as Greek organizations, as well as faith-based. I think we have a very large connection with the faith-based community. And so that's allowed us to have a larger voice, to reach more people. And so we're really proud of all of that. And I'm going to talk about these partners and how we're working together a little later. So you probably say, well, why are we here tonight? You've told us about We Care. Well, really what I thought, as Pershel and I talked, we wanted to make sure that we spent some time with the Zetas, because she approached me saying that you all had, or her chapter wanted to do a project that focused on COVID and influenza and other immunizations. And so I told her we were definitely on board with that, because that was certainly parallel to our mission. And so I thought tonight I would introduce We Care to you as an entity, tell you a little bit about the things that we're doing, but also certainly talk about the why African Americans especially are having issues with health, and what we need to do to prevent being the target of the next pandemic that comes along. So we continue to meet, and now we're starting to have face-to-face meetings again. And just last week, Dr. Sneed met with the group, and we walked away with a plan to really start pushing forth, some of these health prevention mechanisms. And so I want to explain what we're calling a call to action, our We Care Cancer and Public Health Awareness Prevention Initiative, and you all are going to be key to that. So this is the reason why this is a Zeta only event. Now, if you're not a Zeta, it's okay. You have VIP privileges tonight, but that means that we're making you one of our ambassadors. And so we expect you to walk away being able to educate others about some of the things we're going to talk about tonight. So the main reason, or the second reason, not just to tell you about We Care, is that dis-ease is killing us. And African Americans particularly are getting the short end of the stick. And we have got to change in some ways. And part of it, before I start, preaching the typical things we always hear, you got to exercise and eat right. I just really want to put it in context for you because again, there's been so much emphasis on COVID, not getting better, staying out of the hospital and all this, that we are missing the mark and realizing that we just, before the pandemic, were not having good health outcomes. And it's getting worse. We already weren't living as long as our white counterparts for a number of reasons. The disparities have always been there. But when you look at this picture, you see that second to the American Indian and Alaskan natives, our health outcomes are the worst of all of our major, minority groups. So compared to our white counterparts that, not that their health is absolutely perfect, but certainly when we talk about life expectancy, we're not living as long as we could or should be. And so we have to make a correction because it's obvious that individuals, if we don't care about ourselves, we can't expect other people to care about us. So some of the areas where we see these disparities, where we see the impact more on us than others includes obesity, smoking, and binge drinking, just to get started. And how many of us, if you use your reaction buttons, how many of us have family members that, might be overweight or might be smoking or might be drinking? Let me get to my reaction buttons because I have people in all of those categories. So this is part of our issue is that we all know somebody that has we can relate to having these problems. What about how many of us do we know who've had miscarriages or Alzheimer's disease, right, in our family, or cancer? So again, let's raise our hands. Many of us can relate. And if it's not in our immediate family, we know somebody who we've lost. So since the pandemic, unfortunately, I lost an aunt, my father's sister, and then my mother-in-law to lung cancer. And that now, let me say that that's been just in the last year and a half. So in the midst of dealing with all of the stress of going through the pandemic, we were dealing with their care and unfortunate transition. And at the same time, a little bit prior to that, two uncles had colon cancer. Okay. So just think psychologically what that does to you. 2 months ago, my husband, my daughter, and myself all were unfortunately put down in the corner because of COVID. You know, thank God we didn't go to the hospital. Thank God we didn't end up on, a ventilator or something. But thank God, even more importantly, my mother, who's in the home with us, didn't get infected or have any issues. Now 2 years ago, we couldn't have probably necessarily fared as well because the vaccines and stuff, I think, are part of the reason why we did as good as we did. But again, it just speaks to a need for us to be mindful of the impact that these kind of disparities are making on our population. So check out these cancer stats. In a nutshell, Black men are going to have a likelihood of having things like prostate cancer and worse mortality rates than our white counterparts. The same with Black women when we look at things like breast cancer. So these numbers are very telling because again, it could be our uncle, our dad, our husband, our brother, our sons that end up with prostate cancer. And is it not because they don't know? Well, maybe not, but we have some work that we have yet to do. But Black men have the highest death rate when it comes to prostate cancer. And I've already kind of shared with you my story about lung cancer, but it is the leading cause of death in Black men. So 2-3 weeks ago, I had the opportunity to speak to a group that Reach Up has. They have a monthly meeting with community members and got to talk about the ill health of our Black men, especially. And again, with statistics like what we're seeing on here, it just is very telling that we really have to do something to preserve them because they also are receiving the brunt of a lot of the issues with social injustice, with unemployment, the grief that we can't even describe that they internalize more oftentimes, and the depression that kind of goes along with some of the things that they're experiencing in life, we know are contributing factors to why we're seeing such high incidences in health outcomes. So again, looking at here, this slide actually includes some of the other minority groups and how they're impacted. Long story short, Black and brown skin seems to have the hardest time with any kind of health issue. And some of the whys, we're still baffled. I mean, we talk about the cancer disparities. But one of the most unfortunate things that came out of the quarantining, remote working, the telehealth visit, and all of those shifts in healthcare delivery was that people weren't getting screenings like they should have. So even in conversation, with my sister-in-law regarding my mother-in-law scenario, she was a lifetime smoker, but the doctor never remembered throughout COVID to remind her or make a point of doing a lung cancer screening, which should be done annually, right? And especially for someone who smoked their whole life. The same with my aunt. There was so much emphasis on not getting COVID or getting vaccinated that the doctors just totally were not pushing it. The community and patients weren't asking for it. The other unfortunate thing that happened is we had a shortage of hospital beds for a long period of time. We had a shortage of healthcare supplies. You heard about the shortage in protective, equipment and things of that nature. But a lot of our hospital beds, mental health beds, beds that were used for outpatient surgeries. We know outpatient surgeries and those kind of things were shut down because everything shifted over to care for COVID. And so we think that that's part of why a lot of these screenings, unfortunately, got left behind. But there's other reasons that contribute to the disparities. And some of these inequalities are because of environmental factors, that might include things like housing, transportation, and water, to social factors. We know socioeconomic status always plays a role. There's cultural influences, not to mention the psychological and biological things that we're already predisposed to. But the quality of care that oftentimes we get when we do actually get a chance to get care is definitely very different the browner you are, or the beige or yellow, that you are. And many of us desire to find healthcare practitioners that look like us, but there's a shortage in those kind of professionals as well. And so we are in a conundrum. Now, what doesn't help is when we look over here at the behavioral factors, tobacco use, right? Poor diet, excess body weight, physical inactivity. What group do you think is unfortunately experiencing a lot of that? And that would be us. So there is a lot of room for existence. So this whole thing about social determinants of health is very convoluted, very, very complicated, because there's a lot of need for a lot of different people at different levels to play a part in equalizing the playing field. But didn't happen yesterday, and more than likely it won't happen tomorrow, which means we have a whole lot of work to do, which is why we have these kind of conversations, because we've got to empower each other and empower ourselves. So when we think about the pandemic, it uncovered even more health disparities. Again, as we look at the groups that have been and are affected by some of the things we saw here, our Hispanics and African Americans really, were the ones most affected, the ones with most hospitalizations and poor outcomes. And so why is it? As well, a lot of it is because of those predisposing factors, the obesity, the high blood pressure, the chronic disorders, et cetera. But for the most part, again, our minorities were the ones that have suffered the most and were at the greatest risk. So what does it take to shift some of this inequality? Well, we've got to change policy. And that's where things like voting become really important. We've got to get people in political offices and in positions where they can actually move that pendulum so that we can actually get some of these social constructs straightened out, housing and living conditions, as well as some of the other factors. But the pandemic actually just really shed light on just how dysfunctional our healthcare delivery system was, our political system, and all of that. So we yet have a lot of work to do. And because of all of the misinformation that even came straight from the White House, a lot of that influenced, unfortunately, a lot of the things that we saw a lot of challenges. Like there was a real slow uptake to people getting vaccinated when the vaccine finally became available. And so not only was the COVID vaccine, was there resistance against the COVID vaccine, but there was also resistance against common vaccines like the flu. But again, a lot of it was access to care related. And so I just thought I would share with you some of the myths that we ran across as we were doing our educational stints out in the community. So we were hearing people talk about, COVID was a man-made infection. Oh, it was just like getting the flu, but a lot of people really thought that it was a form of genocide that the government had come up with. They were out to kill Black people. How convenient it is that Black people are the ones that are most predisposed and the worst that have outcomes. So there was no way in the world that you could get them to take a vaccine, because the vaccine was going to affect fertility. It was, just better off to get the disease and let your natural immune system work against it, and they want this whole homicide, genocide thing. If Black people got it, it was going to plant a chip in your arm because of the 5G technology. I mean, we heard it all, the tracking devices, and people still to this day, despite the fact that we've had over 1 million deaths, people are still holding on to this belief because social media and the power of misinformation from that just one particular platform. So this is some interesting data that came out in 2020 about where they surveyed, I think, over 2,000 parents and asking them would they get just the flu vaccine, and this was early in the pandemic. And so again, our anti-vaxxers were working overtime to make sure that they got stories out there to, and some of them were partial truths and things that definitely caught everybody's attention. But we went from, again, 39% of individuals more likely to get the flu vaccine down to 21% being willing to get it. Well, what do you think happened when we have fewer people get the flu vaccine? We had more people get it, right? So not only did we have people dying from COVID, but we also had people dying from the flu. So if we look down at the bottom at the little yellow hills in this graph, you see that on average, and I have another picture that shows that typically people still die from the flu. We usually average about 400,000 people or so. But what we started seeing with the pandemic was this combination of people having pneumonia and the flu, as well as COVID, or what they call PIC, the combination of. And you notice this big spike, where people had it. So it was kind of not an issue, or not what we called an epidemic, a proportionate of concern, because we were getting people vaccinated. But as people started hearing all of the things that were going on related to the pandemic, they stopped getting the flu vaccine, wouldn't get the COVID vaccine. And here we were having parallel pandemics kind of taking place, particularly early on. So the impact of what's happening now with COVID continuing as long as it's gone on, and us having all these different variants, is the flu season is lasting much longer. We're hearing about other viral diseases on the rise, like TB having a rise, RSV, adenovirus, some of these other respiratory related viruses. And then you heard of monkeypox. They started talking about it in this last month, right? Yellow fever. Now, some of them aren't as bad in the United States as in other countries, or the countries that they typically occur in. But what we're noticing is a pattern where some of these diseases that typically are more common in the animal species are crossing over to the human species. And so we're reading about, bears and deer that are contracting COVID. And are we going to have to give our dogs, the COVID vaccine? Well, we may have to. But again, if we don't do due diligence in reminding people that the vaccines have made a difference in our lives, a positive difference. Just imagine if we had never gotten the polio vaccine. what life would be like right now, right? So if we look at the deaths associated with past pandemics, the Spanish flu took place over 100 years ago, and there were approximately an estimate of 39.3 million people at the highest estimate that died. And as I mentioned, typically in the flu season, we see about 400,000. And then the Asian flu, the Hong Kong flu, and the Russian flu, we see that, quite a number of people died. And what is happening now, our numbers are starting to creep back up. And so we don't want another pandemic from influenza to actually take place. Hence, we're having to kind of increase our effort to make sure that people are getting vaccinated. So I would like to ask Ms. Jackson if you would be my guinea pig and allow me to do a little exercise, kind of showing how lifestyle factors influence our life expectancy. Because one of the things that happens when you have pandemics is you start impacting life expectancy. So you can tell the truth or you can stretch the truth. It won't matter, because what happens in this workshop will stay in this workshop. But I'll be your Vanna White and plug in, and I want you all to pay attention to this little box here, and it's going to start telling us approximately how long Pershell will live based on how she answers the questions. So your age first.
40.
40 years old. Okay, and you identify as male or female?
Female.
Okay, female. All right. Very good. And height, weight, and so in feet
So
first.
5'7", we just gonna say a smooth 220. We just gonna keep it there.
Okay, cool. All right. Okay, so tell us a little bit about your family history in terms of cardiovascular problems.
Both of my parents had high blood pressure.
Okay, were they before age 55?
Yes.
Okay, so did they live to 70? No, so the second one you think?
My father, yes. Oh, my father, no, but my mom, she is still living. Actually, she's on the call now.
Oh, hey, mommy, hi. So family member lived to age 70 with no cardiovascular problems. That wouldn't be true then, right?
No.
Okay, so the second one or the third one? The third one? I think that's what I'm understanding you to say. They were young.
Nobody made it to 70 without cardiovascular.
Okay,
without
all right.
that.
Okay, all right. Then I think then they were younger than 55 when they started having high blood pressure and stuff. Okay, great.
Yes.
So you see how when I hit this button, you were going to live to 80 if people had lived above 70, made it to 70 without any cardiovascular problems. But then when I go here to 2 or more family members, it knocked you down a few years.
We're not
So
seeing what you're seeing on your screen.
Yeah,
So
we
you're
have,
not-
we're not seeing what the
okay,
calculator.
let me go back and we'll start over. Sometimes that happens when you go to another thing. So we'll back up. Do you need me to back up?
Okay. Yep. There we
Okay,
go.
we'll start there.
Okay.
Can you see it now?
Yes, we can
Okay.
see.
So that prior to that, you just told me your age and what you identify and your weight, et cetera. And you were at 78, and then you said 2 or more family members had cardiovascular problems before age 55. That took you to 76. Now tell me about your blood pressure. Do you know your blood pressure? Do you
Yeah,
check
my
it
blood pressure.
regularly?
Yes, and
Okay.
it's normal.
Okay, and it's normal. Very good. All right. That added a year to your life.
Yeah.
What about stress? Is it a
Mm.
positive influence, or do you have your share of ups and downs, or do you usually get overwhelmed?
I'll go with the middle. Share
Okay.
of ups and downs.
All right. All right. So at 79, what about exercise?
Daily.
Now, daily, right?
Vigorous.
Think you're still riding your bicycle in the morning? You see how that took you up to 82 years?
Nice.
Awesome. What about diet? How are you doing
Oh.
with fruits and vegetables?
Oh, I eat more than 5 portions of fruits and vegetables a day.
Okay, great. Now you got 3 more years added if you can keep that up. Okay. What about wearing a seatbelt when you're driving a car?
Yes.
That added a year.
Ow.
And then when driving, have you had any accidents in the past 3 years?
No.
Good. All right, got another year. Drinking?
And I don't drink more than 2 drinks. I say the last one, 5 or more drinks at once, like more than once a month, maybe like I'm once a month. I'm a once a month drinker, if that.
Okay,
I'm not sure what that one
It'll
would
be the
be.
first one.
so the first one is what you want, right?
Yeah.
All right. Okay, 88. So mommy, she's not giving us all truthful answers here. So she's just allowing me to be able to illustrate this. So please don't hold it against her. She's not an alcoholic. That's the message. What about smoking?
I quit more than 2 years ago.
Okay, quit more than 2 years ago. All right. So the fact that you quit is good. Now you're going to make it to 89 according to this calculation. Now, what about drugs? Ever used them recreationally? Nope.
No.
Okay, cool. All right. Might make it to 90, young lady. Doctor visits.
Oh yeah, I regularly check in.
Awesome. Okay, 91.
Oh, 91.
All right. So just imagine now, this is just an estimator, but it speaks to how important lifestyle, really can be. So while I go back to my slides, well, can you all see it? Nope. Okay, I don't think it. Okay. Are you seeing my slides now? Okay.
Yes.
All right. So what I was really trying to demonstrate is the importance of how lifestyle habits can really influence how long we stay around for our generations, but our future generation. But the other thing that is really important is that the behaviors that we demonstrate can actually impact our children, and we influence them. We actually show them what to do and what not to do. So I'm gonna just want to tell you that pre-pandemic, we were celebrating in 2018 the fact that the life expectancy just for humans in general had increased by almost 4 years. And so that's what this hyperlink talked about. It's just a little short video. But after the pandemic, it actually shortened life. So it's kind of like we took 2 steps forward and 3 steps back. And which groups do you think were expected? Blacks lost a little over 2 years, Latinos over 3 years, whites much, much less. Okay. And so that is really what is both scary and pretty discouraging. So what it speaks to is that if we don't smoke and don't exercise, well, if we do smoke and we don't exercise and eat poorly and drink alcohol and all these things, it really increases our risk for not only a shorter life expectancy, but also poor outcomes, and possibly increases our risk for different kind of cancers. And we just know all of the health issues that go along with not exercising and being overweight. Type 2 diabetes, hypertension, atherosclerosis, just cardiovascular problems in general. And so we just want to be mindful of that, because then we set up our gene pool so that our offspring unfortunately inherit the same risks to these same issues. And so we need to really be mindful of that. So that's part of the reason why We Care is so passionate about trying to close this gap. And we're trying to do it through the medium of education and community engagement. So some of the cancers that we focused on are the ones I mentioned earlier, the ones that are killing us the most, but we also look beyond just cancer and look at things like Alzheimer's disease, because all of the things that we've talked about in terms of risk factors for cancer and cardiovascular disease are also risk factors for Alzheimer's disease. So I always tell people what's good for the heart is good for the brain. So it's important that we do things like exercise and be mindful of some of the other things that you're doing, because again, that gene pool, you might be already predisposed to Alzheimer's disease, but you can also have worse or different outcomes based on your risk factor profile. So we we have done a lot, as I mentioned, in terms of COVID care, but the other disparity area that we do a lot in is mental health. Now, I will say, certainly because those have been primarily focuses of my clinical career, mental health and Alzheimer's disease, as well as tidbits of cancer, it has just been a pleasure to be able to share my talents and experiences through this medium. But one of the things that I've learned that is really important is that we have got to take care of ourselves. So I wanted to kind of take a pause and have you all put in the chat, how are you self-caring? What are you doing and what do you count as self-care? So I'm going to ask Dr. Austin if you would kind of read off to me some of the things that you're seeing in terms of what people might be doing to make sure they take care of themselves. And the reason I bring this up is because this audience is full of women, and most times we're so busy nurturing and taking care of others, we put ourselves on the backdrop. So a story that Ms. Novella might be very familiar with. I had a professor who unfortunately encountered a neurological disease. His wife was his primary caretaker for probably about 8-9 years. Unfortunately, he dies, and when he dies 4 months later, she finds out she has stage 4 cancer, and just had never thought about the need for her to continue, getting her healthcare checkups and things of that nature. And we oftentimes see that where sometimes just recently, another situation, where a caregiver taking care of a person and they unfortunately precede the person they're taking care of in death. And so it speaks to the need for us self-care. So what kind of things are you all putting in the chat? How are you self-caring?
All right, we have some wonderful things from our sisters here. Reading daily devotionals, taking my vitamins, meditate,
Awesome.
get a
Good.
pedicure once a month,
Yes.
exercise at least 5 to 6 days out of every week.
Yeah.
Someone else, Michelle, working out 5 to 6 times a week, reading books, getting
Yes.
a mani-pedi monthly
Yep.
massage, prayer
Yes.
and meditation,
Yes.
vacation, time
Mm-hmm.
to myself, reading,
Wow.
pedicure, manicures,
Okay.
meditation or crystal work, just sitting at the beach after work to chill
Yes.
and relax before going
Yes.
home.
Yes.
And taking of self, also taking care of self, but also checking others.
Okay, wonderful, wonderful. Well, you all really are kind of doing a good job. Well, these are some of the easy solutions here. Definitely that exercising, drinking plenty of water, getting your health screenings, getting your rest, all of that, and certainly eating healthy as much as possible. And I think that we have to think about prevention. And I'm just really proud of you all to see that you already kind of know the what to do. And here are a lot of other things that many that you all said and some you didn't say, but stuff like journaling, definitely growing plants, connecting with nature. But I want to draw your attention to this one here, learning how to say no or not yet is so important because many of us oftentimes overextend ourselves. How many of y'all raise your hand if you think you have a habit of overextending yourself, right? And then you're wondering, how did I get here? What happened, right? Your calendar, everything seems to pile up on each other. But when you first signed up to do whatever, nothing was on your calendar, right? And then everything suddenly piles up. So we have to learn how to say no or not yet. We have to socialize more. I heard, it sounds like Dr. Austin, several of them are meditating. That is really good, but definitely not being shy when it comes to getting some couch therapy. And I tell people, like I hear folks say mani-pedi and all, but all of us on here we're college educated women, right? And so I think things like getting your hair done and mani-pedis and massages, that's professional maintenance. That doesn't necessarily count as that is self-care, but it also is what we need to look the part, right? As these super women that we already are. So I applaud you for all the things that you're doing. And I just wanted to share with you a few extra things. None of them are right or wrong. Don't have to do any of them all the time, but I'm one of of those that definitely meditates in the morning as well. And my husband likes to use the term defragging. You know, sometimes I commute, so by the time I get home, you feel like you're still moving in the car, you know, so just sitting still for 5 minutes, deep breathing, all of that is real, you know, real cool. So we're going to do a breathing exercise real now. And I want you all, I'm going to stop sharing just for the moment so that we can all look at each other, do this exercise. But I would like for you, if you don't mind, and if you're presentable enough, to turn your camera on, just so that we can see each other. And I just want to say you all are some beautiful ladies. And I hope that this exercise is something that you will repeat, you know, later and elsewhere. But I want you to learn how to breathe, because most of what we do, we're like all the time. And that breath needs to come from your navel when you're breathing, all right? So I'd like for you to take your thumbs and put them in your ear. And we're gonna just breathe, take the deepest inhalation in, and I'll demonstrate first. And then we're gonna breathe out as loud and as hard as we can. And you should feel your navel going back towards your spinal cord, okay? That's the goal. All right, so it's gonna look like this. So if people in your house think you're crazy, just tell them everything's okay, I'm just breathing. But let's do that 3 times, okay? And we look like reindeer, but that's okay. We all look like reindeer. So let's take that deep breath in. And you can, if you want to do it without sound, that's fine, but let's do it 2 more times. All right, 1 more. Now I couldn't hear you. I want you to unmute your mics because you can hear me, but I couldn't hear you. So we're gonna breathe 2 more times, and I want you to be loud and proud, because you have a lot of stuff inside that needs to come out, okay? So 2 more times, thumbs in ear, deep inhalation, breathe out. I hear you, Dada. 1 more time. Uh-oh. Now, you don't, you know, make a sound. Just taking those deep breaths. Doesn't your head feel better? Yes, yes. And I'll tell you, laughing also is good for the soul. So that's why I wanted us to turn our cameras on. And like I said, look silly and be silly, because laughing is one of those the best things to really kind of reset you. Now, another one that I do is putting my arms up in the air, take a deep breath. And then as I pull them down, just let it all out, like I'm pushing it out. Yeah. Like you're pulling the garage door down, you know, really, really hard. You know. But we have to learn how to breathe. We have to learn how to breathe. So I just want to thank you for looking silly with me. But I hope that in the process, you learned how to breathe. And I do suggest, you know, there's a lot of data that talks about really the importance of meditation. And a lot of times meditation and yoga, Reiki, those kind of Eastern practices just actually employ a lot of breathing techniques. And so that's what you just want to get in the habit of doing it. And when you're rushing and you're busy all the time, you don't realize that you're probably not breathing as deeply as you actually should. So hopefully you all can see my screen again. And now I wanted to kind of end and sharing with you a little bit about how we want to work with the Zetas and what we plan to do with the We Care Cancer and Public Health Awareness and Prevention Initiative. So I kind of told you our primary community partner is Reach Up. We're still working with Moffitt, but I've been fortunate to work with the Tampa Bay Cancer Control Network. as well as a couple of their other committees that they have, and our national partner, 50 Hoops. Empath Health is a hospice entity, and they provide care not only to patients with hospice, but to the families. They provide things like yoga and meditation for their clients. But we are all coming together to actually provide support to individuals over the next year. And I've asked the TB, when we have the opportunity with TBCCN to get dollars to actually educate people about the need for healthcare prevention. And AHEC is actually going to give us some gift cards. And then we have from Moffitt, the thoracic and lung cancer department is actually going to be donating some lung cancer screenings. So for people that can't afford to pay for them, they'll do that. And then Empath hopefully will be offering some of these free classes so people can learn more about yoga, meditation, and things of that nature. And we're so grateful for Reach Up because they're allowing us to have the social media exposure and output. And then 50 Hoops is also helping us with getting some national recognition in that. So our goal is for the next year, we are going to do our best through social media blasts, working with barbers and salonists, with giving them iPads to educate people on some of the things I talked to you about tonight, and then actually have some focus groups to also get more insights on ways that we can help individuals understand the importance of cancer prevention, particularly. And then we are trying to just, really increase the awareness of cancers and other diseases, empower the community, and certainly explain the importance of things like immunizations, and certainly hoping that we don't end up with another flu pandemic or the COVID pandemic being worse than it already is. But we also want, again, to appreciate what the community feels it needs so that we can definitely make sure that we're resourcing everybody appropriately. We're eliminating access to care and definitely making sure we're optimizing on cancer prevention as much as possible. So as I mentioned, last month was the first opportunity to engage with the community of individuals that interact on a monthly basis with Reach Up and talked about men's health. We launched our social media campaign this past Thursday, the 16th, and it ended actually today, where we were providing some of the facts I shared with you that were provided by one of our public health ambassadors on just generic facts related to cancer incidence in the African American community. And then tonight's program is an example of something that we've done during this week. So I want you to be proud, but I felt that you all should be the first to kind of hear about what we're doing going forward. But some of the other things that we're going to do, we talked about, I've mentioned the lung cancer vouchers. We're also working with community pharmacists, particularly independent pharmacies, to try to add colon cancer testing as an option in community pharmacies. Now, we do have a lot of those take-home kits and that kind of stuff available in community pharmacies, but what we want to do is a linkage to care exercise so that once the findings, the results are there, pharmacists can actually help interpret what they find and then actually make sure that individuals, if they don't already have a provider, that they can find a provider that can kind of help them address some of what they're finding. But our hope is that we reach 2,023 individuals minimally over this next year, talking about either tobacco cessation, immunization, or the need for education. So what we're planning to do is to make some wipeable health screening reminders so that people will know what they need to get based on their age and based on their gender, so that we can just make this a common household. So I know that Purcell mentioned that the Zetas wanted to donate maybe $500 towards this effort, and we envision maybe having some bookmarks in addition to the wipeable platforms, and having some healthcare models so that as we have our live sessions, we can actually have people see what a polyp looks like in your colon and why it is that we take that nasty stuff before we have those procedures to kind of clean us out so that we can detect things like polyps in the colon. We also want people to be reminded of the importance of self-breast exams and understand too what men are experiencing and what we're looking for when they have a prostate exam. But we just really want to remind people that screenings are key in terms of prevention, and that if they need education about the disorder itself or why we're doing the screening or where they can go, let us help them. And so that's kind of what we're hoping to do. So we have a few meetings set up. I'll be sharing this with Purcell so that she can distribute this. You all will probably be receiving Zoom links from Reach Up, inviting you to appreciate some of the workshops we already have planned with 50 Hoops, with Reach Up, and some of the other things. But we hope that as the Greek sororities and fraternities resume in September, that we can have a very big Divine Nine meeting where we actually empower them to actually join us in this effort. It's going to be key because we do really feel that the Greek organizations are essential as a part of this health prevention initiative, because all of us definitely certainly have, as a part of our national initiatives, some attention to a lot of the problems that I talked to tonight. Just representing Delta Sigma Theta, definitely Alzheimer's disease is just but one of several of the initiatives, in addition to mental health, that we try to tackle in terms of providing outreach to the community. So we encourage you to consider We Care as a partner as you do things going forward during the sororal or fraternity year. We'll love to help you, and we'd love to expose whatever educational information you have to our community as well. So as I mentioned, we're going to be doing monthly education events via iPad in barbershops and salons. Right now, we only have 5 iPads, so we'll probably have to rotate them, but we're in need of connection to barbers and stylists that you might be going to. So that's another thing that we'd like to ask you to help us with. We also would like, if you have social media platforms that we can share some of our education with, we would love to do that so that you can join our effort to try to dispel some of the misinformation that's coming across through TikTok and Instagram and Twitter and all these other platforms that's reaching our youth and kind of discouraging them, unfortunately, and following through on a lot of these health prevention ads. We've also been working with incorporating some of the nuances that the youth like by doing podcasts and other kinds of things that hopefully will gather their attention and keep it. But nonetheless, we have to educate them. We know education is power, and power is knowledge. And so knowledge is power. So we just really need to help them. So I wanted to also show our hype video so that you can see our dean in action, and also appreciate some of our other staff members. So I just wanted to, before I share it again, make sure I had it queued up so that you can hear him talk about why we care. So let me make sure, let me go back, because I don't know if I hit the sound. I need to make sure you can hear it. And then once this video is over, we'll be ready to entertain some questions. Can you hear and see?
So, well, why do we care? Why we care? Why this program? We want to improve health outcomes.
The collaboration between USF Health's Tunasia College of Pharmacy's We Care program and Reach Up Incorporated aims to bridge the gap between underserved communities and access to care. We Care's mission is to increase the representation of diverse populations in clinical research. It starts with rebuilding trust between academic and clinical institutions through educating and empowering the community, and then providing research opportunities along with protection and advocacy for the participants.
They want to hear the story from folks who have been through a clinical trial. You have to share.
Okay, not sure why it stopped. It's the first time it's done that. And I apologize for that. Technology is good when it works. But in the interest of time, because we're already at 8 o'clock and we want to allow you all to ask some questions, the last comment that I wanted to really make is that if you wanted to certainly get a copy of these slides, I don't mind sharing them with oh goodness, now it wants to just freeze altogether. Sharing them with Purcell so that she can get them to you, and or you can reach out to us directly. So Dr. Austin and I will put our emails in the chat for you tonight, but we also have an overview sheet that we can share with you. And what it will give you access to is our website. You can see the hype video again. We also have a e-video library that Reach Up hosts for us on their website that shows you workshops of past programs that we've done in the community. So as we went all throughout the pandemic, you can hear us talking about the pathology of the virus, to treatment, to vaccine, to the variants, you name it, as well as some of these other health disparate areas that I referred to. So we encourage you to check that out. And if you definitely have any questions about some of the things I talked about tonight, this is an opportunity to open up to me. If you have any insight, feedback, or things that you'd like us to see going forward as we work with you all during this initiative, I also would love to hear your comments and feedback on what we're proposing at this point. So with that, I will stop and entertain any questions, and thank all of you for your engagement, your patience. And certainly we're excited about working with you over this next year and look forward to September. We want to have a challenge and see which Greek organization can bring the most members to the workshop. And so we want, I think, Dr. Austin, we have the capacity to have, what, 500 or more people on any Zoom meeting. So we want to break Zoom down. Yes. So we'll be definitely advocating, sharing our flyers and that kind of stuff. So I asked Purcell if she would reach out to other chapters so that we can make sure that we get the word across. We want to make it minimally a statewide event, but we definitely would love to have as many members from your home chapter participate as possible, because I promise you, I'm going to bring all 300 or 400 of Tampa alumni, Delta Sigma Theta sisters with me, and I'm going to reach out to my Tallahassee home chapter as well. So we do hope to see you in September. But it looks like Mrs. Belford has a question or comment.
No question, just a comment. We do intend to do this again.
Okay.
Am I correct, Purcell? Is she not listening?
Sorry. Yes, ma'am. I was on mute and I was trying to answer. I apologize.
Do intend to do this again. Unfortunately, we did not have enough time actually to follow protocol to get this sent out across the state.
We understand. We
will certainly be working on that between now and September.
Okay.
So we can get all of the Zetas.
Well, I look forward to
bring all of your Deltas.
Yes, ma'am.
Awesome presentation. And I personally would like to say thank you on behalf of Tau Pi Zeta. We did get a few members on here, and I'm really, really excited that they were a part of this tonight. So thank you so much.
Oh, my pleasure. My pleasure. Well, again, this is what we do. We care. And that's what we wanted you all to know, that we actually care. And so thank you. And we do apologize. I think in our attempt to advertise, by the time we got flyers and stuff approved and made sure we had all the language correct and logos included, we just lost a little time. And we do understand this is technically a holiday tonight, but the 13 or 14 of us that are on, I think you all have enough information, hopefully, to go back to your chapters and communicate what our intent is. And again, we'll share the slides, and we're always available for any additional questions. So I will turn the mic back over to Dr. Austin. I didn't see any questions in the chat necessarily, but Dr. Austin, if you wanted to make some comments, or Pascal as other members of my team, and on behalf of Dr. Sneed in his absence, I just, wanted to say that teamwork makes the dream work, and certainly the things that we've been able to accomplish could not have been done, again, without Dr. Austin's wisdom and guidance. She has been in the Tampa Bay community for so long and made such a meaningful difference. And then we're fortunate to have met individuals like Pascal. So I always want to give them opportunity as well to say anything. So ladies, would you like to say something before Prashelle closes us out?
Well, I just want to say thank you to the Zetas. This is so important to all of us. And so thank you for your commitment. And as soon as you, set up your date and create your flyer, then, we can certainly work with Prashelle and whomever on doing that. Then we'll just be happy to, make sure that we have all 500 of those spots filled for that meeting that you're talking about. One of the other things I wanted to mention is I just put the link to our video library in the chat, so that you can go back, and you can also have your sisters to go back and come to that link and actually be able to watch this video. So again, thank you so much.
Pascal, would you like to say anything?
Here. Nothing different from what Dr. Austin just mentioned, just echoing Dr. Austin's sentiments. Thank you all for partnering with us and allowing us to work with you all to host this event.
Well, Ms. Jackson, and I do want to say on behalf of Ms. Jackson that she is such a sweetheart and personality and very dedicated and committed. And it has just been a pleasure to know her the last 2 years. We met via the pandemic, and she has just been a blessing. And so she has been representing you all extremely well in terms of her faithfulness and commitment. And so we appreciate you so much, and thank you for this opportunity. So we will let you close us out however you like.
Well, I would like to personally say thank you to you guys for speaking to us today. And special thank you to Dr. Hill and Dr. Austin and Pascal for being here, and We Can Reach Up for putting this on. And we definitely will look forward to more collaborations on this. And definitely, as soon as we get that flyer, we're going to make sure those 500 spots are filled. That is the goal.
Okay, all right.
Awesome. So thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in today and taking your time out to listen to about COVID, the flu, and all the good information that was shared here tonight. And I hope that you take your time to do your breathing and let it out. So you guys have a wonderful evening.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
You're welcome.